Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for the Alex on Tech and ITY TV interview. Today I'm joined by Shane Buckley. He's the CEO of Gigamon. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be there.
Thank you for taking the time. Now, before we go any further, Shane, can you please remind us of the Gigamon story as we are here in the second half of 2022 and the products and services you offer to the global market?
Yeah, sure. So Gigamon's been in business for about 15 years. We are the leader in visibility and analytics for hybrid cloud. Essentially, we are the company that some of the largest, most complex, most secure networks in the world use to ensure that they can run fast, stay secure, and innovate. We have been supporting these customers now for, as I said, up to 15 years. We operate on a global basis across Asia Pacific, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and of course the United States.
Now, I understand that Gigamon has been making big moves into the observability market recently. So, can you define what deep observability is and how this differs from visibility?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So observability is actually an old capability. It's been around for many years. And generally, it's used by application performance management companies to really understand how networks and applications are performing. And it's a way to unobtrusively look at traffic and particularly through metrics, events, logs, and traces, often referred to as MELT. Looking at MELT data that comes to and from servers to really understand how those servers are performing. Now, that actually works very well for, as I mentioned, for application performance monitoring. But for security, it's not reliable for one important reason. Logs are referred to as mutable. That means logs can be either turned off by an adversary or a nefarious actor, or more perniciously, the log can be overwritten to make it look like everything is A-OK. And so the Security Operations Center, or the SOC, can't rely on mutable data. They actually need an immutable data source or something that is fully reliable. And so network traffic is immutable. And we call it deep observability because we're looking deep inside the packet of data inside these hybrid cloud environments. We're taking an exact copy of that data, or the network traffic. We're extracting metadata from that feed, and then we're transferring that feed through a pipeline that goes through observability tools. And so from that perspective, that's why we talk about deep observability and deep observability pipeline. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, in the finance world, I would say that network traffic is like the blockchain. You know, it can't be modified because it's a immutable record of what went on. And I mean, as you were talking, I was also wondering if because everyone talks about these days with artificial intelligence and predictive analytics and machine learning, if you're using any of those tools to enhance the observability to make it as rock solid and reliable as possible.
Great question. So, in essence, yes, there's a lot of secret sauce that goes into the creation of this deep observability pipeline. The company was founded on a core set of capabilities, which we call flow mapping. Flow mapping is the ability for Gigamon to be able to determine precisely which applications, application flows across which servers go to which tools, be they network application performance or security tools. And so we can literally take one application feed from one or multiple servers and send it to a very, very specific tool. The benefit in doing that is that the tools don't have to process all the traffic all the time. Specifically now, as networks run up to 400 gigabits per second or faster in terms of single links, it's just not possible to see everything all the time. Most networks are operating with speeds are 1,000th of a blink of an eye. And so it's just impossible for tools to look at everything and make a decision, hey, does this packet go in or out of my network? Gigamon can reduce up to 98% of the traffic volume that's across the infrastructure. And therefore, that reduces dramatically the amount of traffic the tools have to process. It makes them much more effective. Correlation times are faster. And actually, the customers to buy a lot less of the tool because we're doing all the heavy lift for them. So it's a pretty cool thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's obviously something you've also been able to upgrade and evolve over the years to make it more and more efficient. And right now must be the peak of your current sophistication and maturity with that process.
Well, I wouldn't say it's the peak because, of course, our job is not yet done. This is, a long-term process. as people often say in security, it's a cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right now, the mouse is winning. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us,
Yeah.
getting on along with our ecosystem partners to make sure that we continually enhance the security footprint of these networks. We're seeing obviously a tremendous amount of ransomware happening around the world, and our job is to minimize the impact that can have for many of our customers.
Yeah, well, I mean, the peak is not the right word because that implies that there's nothing to come after that, and clearly the world of cybersecurity is and network monitoring and all the rest is just increasing exponentially in its capability. But you just mentioned ransomware, and obviously there's been a lot of focus from vendors around ransomware and also zero trust. So how is Gigamon relevant in this market?
Great question. Well, as you may know, research has shown that in the United States in 2021, 66% of all organizations were hacked, and one third of those, excuse me, one half of those, about a third in total, paid ransomware. So this is also at epidemic portions. The zero trust framework has been around for some time. And in May of 21, President Biden signed an executive order requiring all branches of the US federal government, including all contractors, to immediately implement the zero trust framework. Zero trust is a very inclusive framework or program. It's not a product, it's not a single solution. It's a whole range of products and solutions working in concert together. If you follow the NIST version of the zero trust framework, there are 7 pillars of zero trust. Visibility and analytics or observability is one key pillar. It is considered foundational for zero trust. The simple principle is if you can't see something, then you can't secure it. And so Gigamon is a key pillar of the zero trust framework. We are built into the zero trust architectures for many of our, not just federal customers, but our enterprise customers, be they financial institutions, be they cloud technology companies, transportation companies, etc., also within our service provider customer space. So zero trust is a very big deal for us. We have a very important role. Our role is to ensure there are no blind spots within the network because bad actors hang out in blind spots. And our job is to cast a light on that and ensure that we provide visibility or indeed observability, not just for north-south traffic in the network, but also east-west, often referred to as lateral movement.
Mm.
And our job is to minimize the impact of hackers and other nefarious actors moving laterally across inside these networks, sometimes jumping from on-prem data centers through colos, across into public cloud inside containers. Our job is to make sure they're just not allowed to do that.
Yeah, no, it's just incredible how sneaky those guys have become, moving, as you say, laterally through a network, searching for things. I mean, are people still using honeypots to, trap or entice a hacker once they're in a network, or is that not something that's really done anymore? I mean, I don't know. I'm just asking.
Yeah, sure. There are many different techniques, as you can imagine, Alex, that are used. Probably the most important one is to understand the dwell time that the hacker is spending inside the network.
Mm.
And so if you think about it, when a hacker is looking to get into your infrastructure, there's almost an infinite number of ways they can enter your network. And so odds are that they will get in. Now, the moment they actually get inside the network, there's almost an infinite number of ways they can be actually identified and captured. So the odds are now on the side of the organization. There are a number of things that we do to make sure that we maximize the chance the organization will identify and neutralize and that hacker and minimizing the blast radius. Number one, as I said, is making sure that you get full visibility or observability into north, south, and east, west. That way we see everything that's happening inside the network. We can understand anything that's working kind of out of expected norm. So if there's unexpected traffic volumes coming from servers or printers or other devices, or it could be an OT device on the network, we'll capture that and say, this is out of the norm. There looks like there's something happening here. The second thing is the ability for us to be able to capture metadata. And the metadata is a much smaller footprint than the entire packet. We can capture up to 5,000 metadata elements and send that to a SIM, such as Splunk, for example, or a data lake or any other device. It can be stored inside our Gigamon Threat Insight platform, which is a network detection and response platform. And that can be stored for a year or more. And so having that long-term information is very important because when you find ultimately something that looks erroneous, you want to be able to rewind the tape and understand when did they get access to my infrastructure and where did they go? If you've only 30 days of visibility, which a lot of these organizations have, dude, having 30 days of rewinding of the tape is not sufficient. Many of these hackers sit inside networks for years. They actually look at logs that flow across the network. They capture those logs and store them. And then when they actually compromise the server, they replay the log to the security operations center, giving them a false sense of security that everything is okay. Meanwhile, they're exfiltrating data and they're doing some of the nefarious things they do on a daily basis. So in this cat and mouse game, we think we're probably the most effective cat, although the mouse is pretty devious as well.
Yeah, and as you're talking about replaying logs, I mean, visions in my mind of all those movies where the good guys are sneaking into the bad guys' den, and they've changed the video feed from the cameras to replay something over and over whilst they're doing whatever they're doing to break in. And I mean, it's exactly that.
That's a fantastic analogy. In actual fact, this sounds ironic, but I use the very same analogy with customers at times because, as often said, a picture is a thousand words, and
Absolutely.
you're absolutely spot on. So they will sit there. Their dwell time is short because they don't want to hang out in one place and be caught.
Yeah.
So they'll move under the cover of darkness, as it were. So if you have a blind spot in your network, which they will see because they see all the traffic that's flowing and they see the logs,
Yeah.
then they'll move across to the places that are safe. They'll continue gathering these logs and information. And when they're ready, they just replay that tape and then they can
Yeah.
pretty much do what they want at that stage. And because, unfortunately, the SOC is in ignorance that they're there in the first place.
Yeah, which is scary stuff. But, we've seen all of the reports about digital acceleration from the pandemic, which saw a huge rise in cloud adoption. I mean, it's incredible that this is still taking place. You would have thought everybody would have been on the cloud a long time ago. And then, of course, the cloud technologies keep maturing, and there's on cloud and hybrid and on prem, and a lot of this, as I was saying, it's not just because of the pandemic, but it's business needs. So, can you share how Gigamon views this and how you are part of this equation, and whether that acceleration from your viewpoint continues, whether it's slowed down or whether it's sped up?
That's a super question. I mean, it's pretty well considered that we've made probably 10 to 20 years technology progress and digital transformation over the 2.5 years or so of COVID
Mm.
because of the absolute necessity for organizations and businesses to ensure the customers can fully transact with them on an online basis. And so digital transformation is obviously here to stay. It's very, very important. Also, cloud technologies enable organizations and companies to move faster, enable them to spin up new services, be able to replicate or scale up, also scale out services where there's demand for such from customers. So there's lots of very good technology reasons why organizations should turn to digital transformation and cloud technologies. And oftentimes, cloud is considered very simple until it isn't. And then when it isn't, it's actually really, really complicated. What do we mean by that? And so one of the biggest challenges that CISOs have today is security within hybrid cloud. I've already mentioned the standard-based approach inside cloud is to leverage logs. Logs are mutable, which means they get obviously overwritten, as we've just described. So the big challenge that an organization, now at the board level, certainly the CEO level, is what level of protection or risk are we willing to take in order to implement this digital transformation process in the first place? And so, of course, the answer is you don't actually need to have a trade-off in your security posture. The deep observability pipeline from Gigamon enables you to put the same level of security and controls, and obviously then compliance in public cloud, in private cloud, in often referred to as hybrid cloud technologies. Whether you're operating in a container-based world, it doesn't really matter. We follow the same method that's been very successfully followed inside data centers now for the last 15 years. And so in that regard, we're Switzerland. We don't have a dog in the fight, candidly. We give the flexibility to customers to be able to move workloads wherever they believe they can more effectively operate. And we will ensure that the network application performance, but specifically the security footprint, is maintained as we transition across those different cloud environments.
Now let's shift the conversation to Australia and New Zealand. As we speak, you are visiting Australia, presumably to meet with customers and various other partners in Australia. So, how long has Gigamon operated in Australia and New Zealand, and where are you located?
Yeah, great question. So we've operated here about a decade, it's about 10 years. Australia, New Zealand's been a very, very fruitful market for us for many, many years. We have offices in Sydney, Melbourne, and Canberra, and we have employees in different parts of Australia. We have a tremendous breadth of top tier partners that have helped us in our journey to ensure we provide those security and visibility and observability services really to the top end of town. You look at our footprint in Australia, we operate in three of the top four banks here. We have four of the top five mobile operators. We have a number of key university customers, including the Australian National University in Canberra, who I visited with yesterday. They're a tremendously important customer for us. We operate with people like Transurban, who run the road networks here in Australia. And so we have a broad spectrum of customers that operate in government, in financial services, in mobile operators. It's probably a very similar footprint of customers that we would have in the United States or other tier one countries around the world.
And what is your go-to market sort of play, and who are your sort of channel partners, and how do you work with the channel?
Great question. So we are 100% a channel company. We have a policy we call channel first. And that means when we start working with customers, we engage with our channel partners up front. And many of these projects are long-term in nature. We often say every new customer we get at Gigamon is a customer for life because they do rely on our fabric to be the single source of truth for network application performance and security tools. And so we work through distribution. Arrow here in Australia is our distributor. They work very closely with our channel partners as we do. And our channel partners vary from the large, as you'd imagine, system integrator type partners. We've got some great observability partners who are really cloud experts, particularly as customers move our workloads or their workloads into the cloud. And so it's a broad approach. It's a very focused one, though. So, Gigamon likes to partner with the top, most effective partners in the region that have the best possible presence with our ecosystem partners. And those ecosystem partners are the big networking, application performance, and security vendors that you would deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Now, I was going to ask you about your customers, but you've already explained you have some really top tier customers here in Australia and also in the US. So I want to ask you a different question and just go back towards the cybersecurity side of things. And you talked about the CISOs, the CISOs having, a lot of work to be doing in this regard. And there was a survey in the UK pre-pandemic, and things have only gotten worse since then in terms of cybersecurity, where the average, lifespan of a CISO in terms of their productive work was 26 months before they burnt out. And so it was interesting. I bring this up because in Australia a couple of months ago, there was a launch of something called Cyber Minds. Instead of an S, it's a Z.org. And that is the world's first mental wellness program for cybersecurity professionals. And I've never heard of such a program before. And I was just wondering, what is Gigamon doing in this regard to sort of help its cyber teams deal with this, constant need to be hyper vigilant, and you get every buzz on your phone is, are we being hacked? Is there some nation state or an internal saboteur or some hacker or something trying to get us? And this is something, how are you seeing this in your own company and those of the your customers?
That's a great question. And I would say I would totally concur with the researcher in Australia. The role of the CISOs become absolutely mission critical for organizations today. It's a very, very difficult role. It's almost akin to the medical profession during COVID in terms of the number of risks that they personally take and their responsibilities. Obviously, the medical profession deal with life and death, which is very different than a business perspective, but it is a very, very difficult and a very much a continuously pressurized job that the CISO has. And so in the cat and mouse game that we defined, where unfortunately the mouse is winning, that means the CISO in their mind is losing. And almost all the CISOs that I've met in my career have taken their role incredibly seriously. They're absolutely dedicated to the cause. Our job at Gigamon is to make sure they get absolutely the best quality information at all times so they can have the best possible fight in this cat and mouse game. The fact that we can take our technology that CISOs have successfully leveraged for the past 15 years within their own data centers and provide the same level of posture, security, protection, and compliance inside any form of cloud, including hybrid cloud and container-based networks, is very, very important because the data centers of these large organizations have been protected and leveraged over many, many years. Security is always about defense in depth. Unfortunately, the native tools that exist inside cloud today are just not sufficient because they operate using log-based data that we've already defined. And so the ability for CISOs to leverage techniques and approaches that they have relied upon for over 15 years is very important. And so to those CISOs who are listening to this and watching this show, I would say, reach out to us, give us a call. We're here to help. If you're an existing Gigamon customer and we've worked tirelessly with you and with the ecosystem that you support for the past decade or more, give us a call. We can help fix your hybrid cloud issues as well.
Sure. How do you see Gigamon evolving over the next couple of years? What's on the horizon? What big plans can you share with us that aren't top secret?
That's always the tricky part, is to share the future plans whilst not giving the game away potentially to third parties or competitors.
Mm.
I would say our journey is to continue being Switzerland for our customers and for alliance partners. By that I mean, as the nature of workloads change, and they are changing on a continuous basis. 5+ years ago, we talked about public cloud. The expectation was that most workloads would have moved to public cloud by now. Goldman Sachs issued a survey report in May that showed that only 21% of workloads are sitting inside public cloud today. That's less than half of where is expected to be at this stage.
Mm.
And on a go-forward basis, much more likely the customers will leverage hybrid cloud. You look at the research here in Asia Pacific, 92% of organizations across Asia Pacific are expected to endorse and adopt hybrid cloud capabilities, not just public cloud. But our job is to ensure that wherever customers want to put their workloads, we're there to ensure that they can enable them. But by enabling them, they're not compromising on their security posture or compliance, because that's a deal breaker. Just leveraging cloud technologies for efficiency's sake is not worth it if you're putting your entire organization at risk. And we want to be part of that journey with our customers. We want to make sure they can continue to rely on us for the next 10 or 15 years as their organizations change and as technology moves, as digital transformation becomes a more commonplace item for all of us.
Yeah. Now, as we get towards the end of the interview, I always like to ask a couple of questions about you. And, from your LinkedIn profile, I can see that this is your third CEO position, although you've obviously held top executive level positions for years. So what have you learned that is different and better about being a CEO this time around? And what is a day in the life like for the CEO of a major tech company?
That's a great question. I guess first off, I must be a glutton for punishment if this is the third time that I've taken on board this role, and so that's probably correct. I would say, one of the things that we're seeing changing is the whole item of trust. When you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, Edelman, of course, is a big global PR firm,
Yeah.
and the Edelman Trust Barometer shows that the vast majority of people surveyed trust their CEOs more than they trust their politicians. And so, not to make this a political discussion at all, as the CEO of an organization today, I have an obligation to ensure that our company engages when appropriate on the items of today, not those political items, of course, because we want to make sure we operate in a safe environment, but certainly have an understanding of what's important for our employees. And when we look at our Generation Z and the millennial employees within organizations, they want more participation in their companies to some of these social issues. They're demanding it. They're demanding that we ensure we have diversity, equity, and inclusion right across every aspect of our business. And so at Gigamon, we have a zero tolerance to any form of position over all employees. We believe all employees are created equal. We want to make sure that we support and endorse those that are underrepresented. We have a strong DEI presence within the organization. I have a Slack channel, which is our CEO Slack update news channel, which I and some of the other executives on CEO staff communicate on a regular basis. We have many one-to-one conversations with our teams where we discuss the business of the day. And we want to make sure that we're always doing the right thing for all of our employees all the time. I think that's a very positive thing as well, although I do think it would be better if all of us as citizens of the world turn and can trust more our politicians. But in the absence of that right now, it is the role of the CEO and other executives and companies to really help people understand and get zeroed in on what's important. We've all gone through the last 2.5 years of probably the greatest pandemic, certainly this world has ever seen in living memory. We're not out the other side yet. And so a lot of things are changing around us. So people need stability, they need the lighthouse in the storm. And in some ways, that is the role of the CEO and the CEO staff organization is to provide that stability and guidance to people when the waters are very choppy.
Yeah, and for those who are aspiring to become a CEO, it's often said the CEO has to, is the ultimate backstop for everything. So is that true? Is the day in the life of the CEO? Obviously you're doing forward planning, you're communicating all of this, but are there any things you'd like to tell the young people out there who want to be startup CEOs, and that it's great, but there's also this that you got to
Yeah,
worry about.
Yeah. So first of all, running an organization is a team sport. It's not about an individual. It's not about I or me. It's about us. And I would say the most important thing for me is I've been fortunate enough to build a fantastic executive staff. We have great executives, not just in our exec team, across our vice presidents, our senior directors, and our directors across Gigamon. We have a one Gigamon culture where we all do the right thing at all times for the company. Our job is to serve the company. We believe in having happy employees. Happy employees make happy customers. We believe in high levels of collaboration and innovation across our organization. There are no right or wrong answers. You don't get an opportunity to speak up just because you're a senior person. If you are what we call a Giga Monster, which is a Gigamon employee, all of us have a voice in decisions that we make. So I would say this is much more about the we than it is about the I. My job half the time is the conductor of the orchestra. I don't play a specific instrument. My job is to make sure that we all play the instruments at the right time and the right pitch, so it sounds like great music, not some cat cop negate.
Yeah.
And so I would say to people who aspire to be a CEO going forward, make sure that you're good in collaboration, make sure you're good at communications. You certainly have to spend a lot of time communicating with all your key stakeholders, but don't forget your most important stakeholders are your own employees, because they're the team that will ultimately get the ball over the line, not you as an individual, whether you're a CEO or not.
And can you please share a memory of your first computer? I'm always fascinated by these stories.
Um, Gosh, I'm dating myself now. I think it was the iPhone. I mean, it was the first iPhone. No, I was kidding.
No.
I would say probably the Commodore 64. I remember I was a teenage boy. I won't say what age. I got the Commodore 64 from my parents. It had 64 kilobytes of memory. It was a 1 meg processor using an 8-bit architecture. And I'll tell you something, Alex, I thought I had arrived. I thought I was going to be solving the problems of the universe. It was a
Yeah.
great experience. When you think about it now, you probably have 10 million times the capacity in my Apple Watch that was
Yeah.
sitting inside that small, bitty little Commodore 64.
And I was just reading that it's 40 years since the Commodore 64. It came out in 1982. So just
Really?
incredible how
Wow.
far.
Well, then
Yeah.
I must have been one or two in that case, since I wasn't a
Well,
teenager.
my father bought me a computer in 1979. I was born in 74. And that was something called the Exidy Sorcerer using the Z80 chip. But yeah, the Commodore 64 was I think the 6502, which was, more advanced at the time. Although that was the chip that was in the Apple One and the Apple Two. I think the Commodore 64 uses 6510. But yeah, those were the days when you had to type everything from computer magazines, and you got the cassettes and the tapes, and took forever to load. But was that the incident or the moment that got you interested in having a career in tech? And what was it that got you into cybersecurity?
Yeah, great question. I suppose I've always had a mathematical brain. I'm an engineer, so subsequently I studied electronic engineering at university. I've always enjoyed the freedom of programming, being able to create something from nothing. And so it was exciting times back then to run a program and share our programs, which back then were in BASIC, of course, in terms of software. It's a good collaborative tool. It's also great to get a good sense of self-worth. I was always obsessed with networks, and of course, as local area-based networks became kind of de rigueur in the early 90s, I was very much involved in the growth of that. Initially, I was involved at 3Com, where there were 300 of us as employees, and within like 4 years, there were 2,500. The world was all connecting. It was going absolutely crazy. I had the opportunity to run Asia Pacific for 3Com here in the 90s myself, based in Hong Kong. So I spent a lot of time here in Australia and Singapore and across the region. It was a super time to be in this business. But security actually has been something which has been very interesting to me for many ways, because it is that cat and mouse element. It's not about doing something in a very repetitious way. It's about doing things that are consistent, but doing things in a way that you actually look at behavior and how behavior changes and how behavior impacts what's happening inside your infrastructure. And of course, security is defense in depth. So organizations need to have multiple different tools. But then the question is, how do you connect them all together? How do you actually ensure that in the sea of information that customers have within, for example, their Splunk or SIEM architecture, they can turn to the right information at the right time to be able to fix a particular incident? You look at the lives of these SOC analysts. SOC analysts wake up in the morning, and probably by midday, they have 1,000 or more events they've got to look at. Any top end SOC analyst can't deal with much more than 25 or 50 events. So our job is to automate, is to make sure that we take these problems off the table. One of the things that was really cool about Gigamon and why I joined Gigamon is, in a field of, say, 10 haystacks, and you've got 10 fields, now you've got 100 haystacks, you've got a needle in hundreds of haystacks. If you start pulling every haystack apart, it's going to take you a long time and a bit of good old luck to find that needle. At Gigamon, we distill that down into the very haystack where there's the needle and say, hey, the needle's over there, you need to go fix this. And so our ability to do that and play our little part in the infrastructure, which enables security people to move faster and correlate faster, that really is important for me. And genuinely, given we sit inside some of the largest, most complex, most secure networks in the world, some of these are big government networks that actually protect citizenry, protect individuals. It's a very, very serious role that we take, and we take the responsibility very seriously as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, my second last question is, what can you please share some of the best advice you've received in life to help you get where you are today?
I would have to say it's my father, who unfortunately died when I was 24 years of age. So he died way too young. But he used to always say, the Lord gave you two ears and one mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak.
Excellent advice. Something I should follow sometimes. So,
You said it to me.
yeah, that's true. I'd love to talk. So, what is your final message to IT Wire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers and partners?
I would say we are living in difficult times. Given some of the geopolitical challenges we have, given some of the nation state actors, given some of the events that are happening around us, malware is here to stay, ransomware is here to stay. We need to do the best possible job we can to ensure that the cat wins and the mouse loses. There are many techniques available for companies to put in place in order to protect your infrastructure. Make sure you look at all the good stuff. Don't just take what vendors say at face value. Go out and do your research. Gigamon exists in many of these most complex networks. We'd love to have the opportunity to talk to you. Sometimes it may mean you deciding to deploy something else. That's okay as well, because our mission in life is to make sure that we provide the actionable intelligence to these organizations so they can run fast, stay secure, and innovate. And any way we can do to help customers do that, Alex, we're all ears. So give us a call.
Well, Shane Buckley, CEO of Gigamon, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and to explain the latest that's happening at Gigamon. And I do hope we can talk again in the future.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for inviting me to the show.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye.